Folks, Donald J. Trump is looking to jumpstart his administration with one massive bill that basically includes everything in his agenda. It's going to cover everything from border policies to taxes to energy, and I'll be going into this plan. And meanwhile, Elon Musk is being framed as the new kingmaker, but he's facing backlash in Europe now because he's bringing attention to various things and backing political groups who they don't want to be backed. And in other news also, the mystery virus spreading in China has now allegedly hit the United Kingdom. I'll be talking about these topics and more, so let's jump into it. Now, first off, folks, President-elect Donald Trump is hoping to jumpstart his administration with one big bill, covering everything from border policies, taxes, energy, and a lot of other stuff. And with less than 2 weeks before the inauguration, he has held closed-door meetings to win support among key figures in Congress, mostly Republicans. Now, the goal of this is to fast-track the agenda through Congress, and he wants to have the package of legislation on his desk by the end of April. And by the end of April, he wants to sign this and basically enact his whole plan. Now, Trump briefly explained this plan in a post on Truth Social, and here's what he said. He said, members of Congress are getting to work on one powerful bill that will bring our country back and make it greater than ever before. We must secure our border, unleash American energy, and renew the Trump tax cuts, which were the largest in history. But we will make it even better. No tax on tips. It will be made up with tariffs and much more from countries that have taken advantage of the U.S. for years. He said Republicans must unite and quickly deliver these historic victories for the American people. Get smart, tough, and send the bill to my desk to sign as soon as possible. And he said, make America great again. Now look, there have been rumors on some of these discussions, closed doors, what's actually being said behind the scenes. Trump has been allegedly inviting whole groups of House Republicans to go and meet with him at Mar-a-Lago. And the list of people being invited has been apparently carefully made. He's not just inviting everybody. NBC reported on this. They cited 3 unnamed sources, take it for what it's worth. They said between January 10th and January 12th, members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, those are again the Republicans who are basically full in with Trump, the House Freedom Caucus. And also it says lawmakers from states affected by the state and local tax, the SALT deduction cap, chairs of key committees and other groups of Republicans will visit Trump at his Florida residence just days ahead of his inauguration to a second term. And it says that Trump wants to make sure that Republican lawmakers across the ideological spectrum, but among Republicans, are unified and on the same page with this ambitious legislative agenda, 2 of the sources added. Because remember the context of this. Trump has a supermajority. He has both branches of Congress, both chambers. He had this same thing in 2016 and 2017, you might remember. But that got overturned, of course, because, well, the Republicans lost in the midterms, and Trump lost that supermajority. When he has the supermajority, he can do a lot, but only if Republicans are with him. And so it seems he wants to make sure Republicans are with him. Now, it notes as well, the spokesperson for the Trump transition team did not immediately respond to requests for comment about the next weekend's visits. But folks, it also appears that House Speaker Mike Johnson is on board with the plan to pass Trump's agenda using one big bill. Some people want to have 2. Trump wants 1. And he discussed this during a recent interview on Fox News' Sunday morning features with Maria Bartiromo. Watch this.
What are they? Well, obviously, we have to secure the border. We've got to make sure that our Border Patrol agents and our immigration enforcement agencies have the right directives from the White House, but also the right resources to do their job and secure that border once and for all. We've got to take care of the dangerous illegal criminals who have come over, and all that's part of it as well. And we've got to shift immediately to the economy. Maria, you know, you talk about every day. We've got to revive the U.S. economy, and we can. We know how to do it. Part of that is preventing the largest tax increase in U.S. history, which would happen automatically at the end of next year if we don't get our ducks in a row. So we're going to make sure that happens. We're going to incentivize American companies to manufacture in the U.S. again. And we're going to make sure that the regulatory burden and the red tape that has smothered our free market is reduced and eliminated. And we're going to be dismantling the deep state all along the way. We're going to restore American energy dominance. So many different pieces to this, Maria. They all have to work together. And, of course, the president has asked us and really needs us to address the debt limit crisis before that hits in June.
Now, there are different allegations in how much support or lack of support Trump may actually have on this plan. Politico noted there are rumors that not all Republicans may be on board with it. They're suggesting some might not be. And they said even as Johnson laid out his ambitious timeline during the weekend and passed along Trump's preferences, he's faced pushback. It said some House Republicans worried that Johnson's remarks Saturday were him characterizing what Trump wanted rather than Trump weighing in directly. But one person familiar with the reconciliation talks told Politico that Trump is pushing the one package approach, and it was the message from his team all weekend. And notably, Trump seems to have confirmed this with his post on Truth Social. It adds the one bill strategy, as opposed to two or more, is still sparking some skepticism, hinting at the battle ahead as Republicans try to get the near unity needed to get a reconciliation bill to Trump's desk. It says Johnson acknowledged Sunday that the bill could slip into May. Might take a bit longer. And notes as well that meanwhile, incoming Senate Budget Committee Chair Lindsey Graham also raised concerns about delaying the border piece of the package by insisting on passing everything at once. It notes that under the two-bill strategy backed by Graham as opposed to one bill, Republicans were hoping to start by passing a border and energy bill next month, meaning they believe they can fast-track some of this stuff and then maybe get the more controversial stuff separate in a different bill. We'll see. Now, folks, in other news, Elon Musk has been framed as a key figure who may have helped Donald Trump get elected. And some of the corporate media has been framing Elon Musk as the sort of unelected president with his growing influence on U.S. politics, his era of Trump, and mainly after he and Vivek Ramaswamy, who will be running the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, along with Trump, disclosed to the public what was inside the massive budget bill that Congress was set to pass in December. Now, Elon Musk detailed publicly what that bill actually contained. And when Republicans and Democrats seemed on board to pass that massive bill stacked like this, Elon Musk posted about it, said, why is Congress giving themselves raises? Why are they giving themselves money in this package? Why are we sending money to all these random countries? Why are we spending money on stadiums? Why are we blowing money like we have a lot of money when we're in massive debt? That was the big question. Now, after he brought that forward, Congress then backed off and they actually reworked the bill into a much smaller package. It went from a stack like this to a little thing like this. Now, that whole move raised some eyebrows because some people were questioning, well, how is it that Elon Musk could affect Congress? How is it that Elon Musk could stop this big, massive spending package from getting passed? Well, what Elon Musk really demonstrated was the power of public awareness. And this has been his big platform lately. How exposing information that some people may not want to be shown to the public can stir up calls for reform from the public, and then again lead to changes in government policy because people demand change. Now, it was a sort of shot over the bow, powered by his commitment to citizen journalism on the X social media platform. His big thing is saying, you are now the journalist, right? And now Elon Musk is also demonstrating some of this similar influence in Europe. And Europe is very angry about this, at least some people are. Now, Elon Musk has come out and he's backed some political parties in Europe that many people deem as being far-right or extreme or whatever else. And we've, of course, seen the political shakeup in Europe where conservatives and right-wing political parties are overtaking the kind of stronghold that socialist parties have taken over many of these countries. Elon Musk has exposed issues such as the rape gangs in the United Kingdom. He's exposed that many officials have seemed to want to keep this quiet, that many of them may have been involved in keeping it quiet. He's also been holding discussions with key officials in the European Union. And this has led some European leaders to come out publicly to criticize Elon Musk for alleged political meddling. They're saying, stay out of our country, stay out of our politics, and they're framing this as a type of foreign interference. Now, Politico said this. It said, Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store said Monday, we found it worrying that a billionaire social media owner like Elon Musk is inserting himself into the politics of other countries. And notes that Musk, a key ally of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, has been on a social media rampage over the holidays, endorsing the far-right Alternative for Germany, AfD party, repeatedly denouncing the UK's Labour Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and even torpedoing his relationship with British hard-right chief Nigel Farage. The context of that, again, is that Elon Musk is talking about the rape gangs and how politicians there have kept it quiet. Now, Elon Musk, it says, has also announced that he will hold a live discussion this week with the AfD's Chancellor candidate, Alice Weidel, on X ahead of Germany's snap elections on February 23rd. And the concern in Germany is that the AfD has basically been deplatformed. In Germany, you can't see it, you can't talk about it. If you go to their events, they label you as far-right, just like them. And so no journalist dares talk about them, nobody dares cover them. They are silenced. And the only way you can learn about them is if you do it yourself. Elon Musk is breaking that by giving them a platform. And many say that by giving them a platform, it's going to meddle in their elections. How dare you talk to the different candidates of a political election because they deem that as being a threat. Now, among Elon Musk's bigger moves right now as well is he's been making online posts, as I noted, about the rape gangs in the United Kingdom. And how the crimes have been allegedly covered up by various politicians, by different news outlets, and even within the country's police departments. He's suggesting that basically the government and different establishment sources have kept this whole thing quiet. And look, the cover-up is being blamed on identity politics. This is wrapped up in the whole arguments of mass migration because many of the alleged perpetrators are men of Pakistani descent. And so they're framing this as a race issue, as an anti-immigration issue, as a religious discrimination issue because many of them are Muslim. And it's being framed along the lines of identity politics. And so a lot of people do not dare to talk about it because of that. Now, in a post that had over 53.8 million views on the afternoon of January 5th, Musk wrote this. He said, quote, "For anyone doubting the severity and depravity of the mass gang rapes of little girls in Britain, go to the source material and read the court transcripts." He said, "I did. It is worse than you could possibly imagine." And Elon Musk then details the report. He shows excerpts of it, and he notes how people who expose the crimes are themselves targeted by the UK's legal system instead of the gangs. And Elon Musk adds this. He says, quote, "Imagine you're a father going to rescue your daughter from gang rape and possibly murder, but the police arrest you instead." And of course, in many of these cases, the girls are raped by many, many men passed around. These are girls like 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old. Sometimes they inject them with drugs. Sometimes there's even been cases where these men have lit them on fire and killed them. And then, of course, there are other cases where they've been overdosed with drugs and have died. And so many of these girls, in addition to being raped, have been murdered as well. And people who talk about this have themselves faced repercussions, imprisonment, fines, and everything else in the United Kingdom. And so while the gangs have been able to do this, the criminals in the UK legal system have become not the gangs, but instead the people who talk about the gangs. Now, Musk's actions to bring attention to the issue are also causing a very big stir in the United Kingdom, where there's now a growing public backlash. People are very angry about this, and many say that it's making the United Kingdom look really bad on the world stage. It is damaging the public image of the UK all around the world. The Free Press said this. It said, "The grooming and serial rape of thousands of English girls by men of mostly Pakistani Muslim background over several decades is the biggest peacetime crime in the history of modern Europe. It went on for many years, it is still going on, and there has been no justice for the vast majority of the victims." It notes that British governments, both Conservative and Labour, hoped that they had buried the story after a few symbolic prosecutions in the 2010s, and it looked like they had succeeded until Elon Musk read some of the court papers and tweeted his disgust and bafflement on X over the new year. Britain now stands shamed before the world. The public's suppressed wrath is bubbling to the surface in petitions, calls for a public inquiry, and demands for accountability, not just against the gangs, but against the politicians, the law enforcement organizations, the media, and everybody who has helped keep this whole thing silent. And it means that they want accountability. The scandal, it says, is already reshaping British politics. It's not just about the heinous nature of the crimes. It's that every level of the British system is implicated in the cover-up. Meaning that by doing this, Elon Musk is kind of destabilizing the system there. And many people are angry at him for doing that. And on that note as well, Musk is seeing strong backlash on this as well. In addition to his criticism of some of the country's key political figures, he's facing some other issues. The Mirror UK, again a UK news outlet, said this. It said Musk has strongly criticized the UK government over the country's handling of multiple grooming gangs. It says the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, hit out at Musk's comments, branding them as a disgraceful smear. It says, speaking to BBC journalist Laura Kenzenberg on Sunday, he said, quote, "It is a disgraceful smear of a great woman who has spent her life supporting victims of the kind of violence that Elon Musk and others say that they're against." It says defenders of the UK government have said a national inquiry concluded in 2022 with investigators looking into sexual offenses by grooming gangs across the UK between 2010 and 2014. It adds that Professor Alexis Jay, who led the inquiry, voiced frustration in November that none of the probe's 20 recommendations had been implemented in the 2 years following its conclusion. Noting, as Elon Musk brought up, they did investigate it in a 4-year period, 2010 to 2014. It did not include the stuff currently happening, and the recommendations were not implemented, meaning it's causing a big stir there, and a lot of people are mad about it. Now, the topic has become extremely sensitive in the United Kingdom. In fact, people who have talked about this have been thrown in prison. People who've tried exposing it have themselves been jailed. And that is raising some questions over what they actually care about. Now, police officials in the country, in the United Kingdom, they were even threatening to extradite and jail Americans. People who were posting stuff on the internet right here in the United States were getting threatened with prison in the UK, because the topic tends to get mixed in with people who oppose mass migration policies in the country, and they frame anybody being against that as being basically a Nazi. Now, this was from August of 2024. New York Post, it said this. It said London's Metropolitan Police Chief warned that officials will not only be cracking down on British citizens for commentary on the riots in the UK, because there were riots in the UK over this issue, but on also, it says, American citizens as well. And they said, quote, "We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you." Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley told Sky News. And at the time, it says, riots have broken out across the United Kingdom in recent days over it alleged false rumors spread online that an asylum seeker was responsible for a mass stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance event that left 3 girls dead and others wounded. And it's the murders allegedly committed by now 18-year-old British citizen born to Rwandan parents, sparked a series of violent protests that tapped into broader issues and concerns about the scale of immigration in the UK. In other words, this was framed as a kind of backlash against mass migration. And in the United Kingdom, the individual carried out that mass stabbing event was the descendant of immigrants, although not himself an immigrant. Now, backlash is growing in other parts of Europe as well. In France, for example, President Emmanuel Macron is also criticizing Elon Musk for potentially influencing the politics of various countries in the region. The Guardian said this on France. It said Emmanuel Macron has added his voice to a growing chorus of European criticism of Elon Musk, accusing the world's richest man of intervening directly in the continent's democratic processes, including Germany's snap federal elections next month. It says the French president joined the Norwegian and British prime ministers and a German government spokesperson on Monday in responding to a barrage of hostile posts by Musk, it says, backing far-right political parties and attacking left-wing politicians in Europe. Now, the big issue with this is that by raising these conversations, Elon Musk is kind of adding some fuel to the fire of a very big political problem Europe is having right now, where a lot of the incumbent governments are facing collapse. Germany, France, the UK, massive political shakeups, very similar to what we're seeing right now in Canada, by the way, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just stepped down. The concern of many of these leaders is that what has been a historical kind of left-wing hold on the governments in these regions is now collapsing. And they're finding backlash from the right wing, and in Europe they tend to frame every right-wing party as Nazis. And again, because one of the big platforms there for most of the right wing is the mass migration issue. And so this gets tied into the narratives of race and racism and everything else, which is also how this ties in with what you're seeing in the UK with the rape gangs and people criticizing it and the criticism getting framed as racism. That's basically the problem we have right now in the United Kingdom and other parts of Europe. And speaking of the UK, folks, in other news, the mystery virus that I mentioned yesterday that was spreading in China, it has now allegedly hit the United Kingdom. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. We'll be back in less than 60 seconds, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The mystery virus that has been spreading in China has now allegedly hit the United Kingdom. Now, folks, the CCP has remained silent on the issue. We're not seeing much from the regime itself, but posts on Chinese social media have shown images of hospitals full of people, parents with their children, and allegations that the crematoriums are running full steam, burning dead bodies. Now, the Daily Mail said this. It said, Mail Online can reveal that the bug, which can prove fatal in the most vulnerable, is already on British shores and rising in prevalence. And it's that latest UK data shows cases of the virus responsible for the packed hospitals and waiting rooms in China, and eerily similar to the early days of COVID, have seen a marked increase in recent weeks, slightly higher than at the same time last year, suggesting that last year they had this too. What they're seeing right now is just a bit more. Now it notes, UK cases of HMPV first emerged in 2001 with roughly just 4 cases per week detected by PCR tests in winter on average, but experts have said today have cautioned that a hidden rise may be underway, as the virus can lurk in the body for days before causing telltale symptoms, leaving people to spread it unknowingly. However, it says they warn that the spike in cases should not cause undue concern. It notes that HMPV typically causes symptoms similar to the common cold, including a cough, runny nose or nasal congestion, a sore throat, and fever that clear after around a few days. Now look, it's not clear how serious the virus is, as the UK outlets are noting. it's not that serious, the ones they have in the UK. The reports coming out from China are very different. They're saying a lot of people are dying from it in China. Now, some reports are suggesting this is a type of human metapneumovirus, or HMPV, and in the UK, that's the outbreak they're talking about now. But there have been mixed reports on whether that's actually what's spreading in China. Again, in China, this is the mystery virus because the CCP is not talking about it. We're not hearing any reports on what it actually is. People are just kind of making theories over what they believe it is. The allegations this has spread to the UK are based mostly on the fact that some people in the UK are being diagnosed with that specific virus, and again, it's not clear whether this is the same one. Now, in other news, folks, Taiwan is alleging that a Chinese ship may have intentionally damaged an undersea cable that the country needs for its communication systems. And this is becoming a more common phenomenon in the world. China, in many cases, or Russia being accused of it, severing the internet cables and the communication cables of countries just by sailing a ship, dragging its anchor, and breaking that cord. And this has been deemed as kind of an unconventional war tactic that can blind the country, that can shut down their economy. The Financial Times said this. It says, Taiwan has asked South Korea for assistance investigating a Chinese-owned ship suspected of cutting an undersea cable off its northern coast on Friday. It says Taiwan telecoms operators Chunghwa Telecom and the Taiwan Coast Guard said on Saturday that the cargo vessel, this is Shunxing 39, was believed to have caused damage to a communications cable close to the port of Keelung on Taiwan's north coast on the morning of January 3rd. And it said it follows incidents where Chinese ships came under scrutiny when fiber optic cables in the Baltic Sea were severed last month and a gas pipeline and cable were damaged there in October of 2023. Meaning, Chinese ships have done this before, and so this would not be out of character for them. They have plausible deniability. Oh, sorry, we forgot to lift our anchor and we destroyed this undersea cable. This was not a move by the CCP. It was merely my own carelessness. That's the plausible deniability narrative they can make. Now, some analysts have warned the CCP could do this to Taiwan, and this is why it's so significant that they just seem to have done this. The allegations were if the CCP were to try to take over Taiwan, it would need to cut the country off from the outside world. And part of that would be severing those internet cables, severing different undersea elements that supply Taiwan and keep it connected. Now, the Chinese Communist Party has repeated its plans to take Taiwan, including recently and potentially by using its military and maybe even invasion. And one of the forms this could take is what they call this kind of castle siege strategy. I've been discussing this. It would be the idea of the CCP basically creating a police blockade, or the CCP cutting off those cables surrounding Taiwan with its military and starving them out economically, and then stirring up internal discord to make people riot and protest against the government there. Now, the attack also highlights a threat that some analysts have warned the CCP may pose to the United States as well. Chinese hackers allegedly have the ability to sabotage critical infrastructure right here in the United States. That means our water supplies, our electric grid. It means the things that keep this country running. And the White House is allegedly aware of this as well. Wall Street Journal said this. It said the message from President Biden's national security advisor was startling. Chinese hackers had gained the ability to shut down dozens of U.S. ports, power grids, and other infrastructure targets at will. They can do it whenever they want. This is Jake Sullivan telling communications and technology executives at a secret meeting at the White House in the fall of 2023. It is according to people familiar with that meeting, it says. Now it notes, the attack could threaten lives, and the government needed the company's help to root out the intruders. What no one at the briefing knew, including Sullivan, is that China's hackers were already working their way deep inside U.S. telecom networks too. Remember that Salt Typhoon. The two massive hacking operations have upended, it said, the U.S. understanding of what Beijing wants while revealing the astonishing skill and level of stealth of its keyboard warriors, once seen as the cyber equivalent of noisy, drunken burglars, Chinese military hackers. Now, of course, one of the two hacking operations they mentioned is the Salt Typhoon hacking group, which is linked to Chinese cyber intelligence and other groups. And remember, they were able to access data from millions of users, including calls with Donald Trump as well as J.D. Vance. They breached the cell phones of Trump and Vance. And this is through their breach of Verizon and AT&T. And now, folks, attacks like this are part of the CCP's unconventional war strategies. If they were to wage war against us, it would include attacks like this against our critical infrastructure. The things that the Biden White House is now saying that the regime could do basically at will. Now, that's included in what's been referred to as the unrestricted warfare strategy. The CCP's documented war strategy against the United States would involve actions like this. And the regime's assassin's mace strategy, that's what they call it, that would include the use of cyber attacks against American infrastructure, EMP attacks against our power grid to shut our power grid down, the destruction of crucial American satellites, anti-satellite warfare, basically making it so our GPS systems don't work, our missiles can't find their targets, and our troops can't talk to each other. And also other tactics, including the use of targeted military strikes on U.S. bases in other countries. Were the CCP to declare war on the United States, that would be the surprise attack, very likely on day one. And so the allegations that the CCP has access to our networks, has breached them, and they may still be in there, that is deeply concerning as it relates to the potential threats of war from the Chinese Communist Party. Folks, that said, hit the like button, leave a comment, let's jump into some questions. Real quick, also on that note, Epoch Times had a great article on China's massive hacking campaign targeting the U.S., and they go into the 20 largest cyber attacks against the U.S. in the last decade. I can put the link in the chat if you'd like. The article is China's massive hacking campaign targeting the U.S. Some great background for those of you curious about what these Chinese hackers have actually done and what this actually looks like. Let's see, first off question here. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, when will our government start taking the threat of CCP seriously? They are asleep at the wheel. You know, I think they only recently started taking it seriously. I think 2019, 2020. Really, COVID-19 was the wake-up call for a lot of countries. I would actually say that they still haven't fully woken up. You know, the call with a lot of government officials is, wow, geez, the Chinese military keeps threatening us. Wow, geez, the Chinese military has breached all of our critical infrastructure. Wow, they're feeding the fentanyl crisis and killing 70,000 Americans every single year. Wow, look at this. They're breaching all these companies, blackmailing politicians, creating secret police stations in America, trying to export censorship and religious suppression onto American soil. But gee, you know, sure would be nice to trade with them still. Sure would be nice to not ruin our relationships with them. You know, what is this like schizophrenic policy we have with the CCP? This is like an abusive relationship. If you were in a relationship with somebody and they treated you like this, you're probably in a toxic relationship. You know, America has a toxic relationship with the Chinese Communist Party, and we need to break up. We need to end this. We need to get the Friends of America together and have like an intervention because it's getting ridiculous. Obviously, they hate us. Obviously, they want to destroy us. They even tell it to our faces. They say this publicly. We know the military threat. We know all this other stuff, but we're so addicted to that money that we won't let it go. It's like a toxic relationship only being maintained because you don't want to split your finances. You know, you don't want to decouple, right? But America needs to break up with the CCP desperately. It's abusive. We're getting abused. Let's see, Johnny McWilliams is saying, Josh, what do you think Elon Musk's deeper motives are? He seems to have his hands into everything business-wise and government-wise. I've thought about that in terms of what Elon Musk actually wants. I don't know Elon Musk's thinking. I'm not, obviously I don't know him. I've never had a conversation with him. And so I can only tell you from the surface of what he does. My impressions of Elon Musk are this. He cares a lot about the future. He cares a lot about, he's kind of like a kid still in some ways, right? He likes rockets and he likes big machines and drills. He likes the idea of robots. He plays video games a lot. He's like one of the top Diablo 4 players somehow. He plays video games, tweets on, I guess, X or posts on X constantly, and builds rockets and all this stuff. And that's just what he does as his way of life. He believes very much in freedom of speech, although he wants positive reinforcement, and he's having some backlash now with the far right in the United States, while allegedly being accused of aligning with the far right in Europe. It's a very weird dynamic. Some would argue that he wants to have political power. I would question what that actually looks like, because I don't think he wants that. I think that what Elon Musk really believes in is populism. He often talks about vox populi and, the people demand it and so on. He seems to align very much with Trump's brand of populism, governments that serve the interests of the people. And he seems to be very interested in kind of breaking a type of socialized control over systems. He doesn't like centralized control because he seems to believe that this is purely my impression, right? But he seems to very much dislike centralized control that has a suppressive element to it. And so, for example, governments trying to regulate speech, big media trying to regulate speech, people claiming that they have a better voice than the average citizen, governments that believe you shouldn't be able to talk about certain things or criticize certain things, governments that try to enact policies that restrict innovation and development. He's against a lot of that centralized control. And he seems to believe that if you give that power to the average citizen, then that is better for the world. And having platforms of open engagement, platforms of innovation, and that type of thing is a more healthy way to run a society. This is my general impression of him. I think you could say he maybe has some libertarian type leanings, libertarianism mixed with populism. And that brand of politics, there are different takes on Donald Trump. I would say a lot of people view Trump like that, at least among his supporters. They don't view it as not, a lot of people on the far left say, oh, he's a Nazi. What kind of a Nazi would want to what kind of a Nazi would want to relinquish government control? It's not about more government, it's about less government, right? You're not very fascist if you don't believe the government should control everything. In fact, Benito Mussolini, the head of the fascist government in Italy, declared that everything within the government, nothing outside of it. Fascism and Nazism and communism are the beliefs that the government should run everything, everything. And so if you believe in the opposite of that, you are not a Nazi and you are not a fascist and you are not a communist. If you believe the government should not control everything, you are kind of the opposite of that. The move against centralization, ironically, is the very opposite of what they accuse it of. Whereas on the other side, the people who demand absolute government power, the people who demand that only a small subset of people should be able to dictate speech and dictate everything in a society, that's what the Nazis believed, right? Ironically. And so, we have a real false debate in society right now where fascists and Nazis and communists are the ones calling everybody else fascists and Nazis and communists, ironically. And so back to the point of Musk, he seems to kind of reflect this worldview. And if you understand what Europe represents, I think in his eyes, you could say from a business standpoint, a lot of European countries like the European Union, they're doing a lot right now to suppress free speech in the United States. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg, I'll probably do more on this tomorrow. Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook just published a video on this. He announced they're going to end the fact-checking and a lot of the content moderation on Facebook. And he's saying that he's planning on working with Donald Trump to try to unravel some of the censorship pressure coming to the United States from Europe. Europe has been dictating the ability of free speech on American platforms because a lot of these platforms are global. Elon Musk is facing, for example, censorship pressure from Brazil, right? In addition to the European powers. A lot of European countries are fining American tech companies hundreds of millions of dollars on a rolling basis, to the extent we're basically bankrolling some of the governments in Europe by letting them fine American companies. And so I think Trump is going to do a lot with this because, we can't let like Ireland basically fund its government by, levying fines on American businesses every single year. We can't let Europe spread its censorship laws onto American soil and even threaten to extradite and arrest Americans if we say things they don't like. Because Americans, whether they like it or not, we have the Constitution here which protects our rights to free speech. And if we let them undermine the basic rights of Americans, then we no longer are living in a free country. We are living under the policies of their government, not of ours. And that damages the very idea of sovereignty. If they want to cut themselves off from the world and live in like an intranet, happy land bubble, let them. But that's not what we have. And I think this is what Trump is going to be debating with them on. You need to quit undermining the laws and the rights of Americans if you want to do business with us, if you don't want us balancing out our international trade deals to the extent where you stop living off of Americans, basically working with trade deficits with you, that we're not going to put up with you anymore putting tariffs on American companies while we just let you do it. We're not going to let them take advantage of America anymore. That's the narrative coming from Donald Trump. And so he's going to be, look, Trump is saying publicly now, in fact, even in his recent speech on this one big bill, that he's planning on funding a lot of the U.S. government just with tariffs. So tariffs are going to be huge. And tariffs are also a political negotiating point. The other side of the problem is, as it relates to Musk and Trump and others, is some people would argue that a lot of the current institutions in the world, the governments that have gained almost total power in some countries, the establishments that kind of dictate free speech and what's seen online and everything else, that these things cannot survive if people have free speech. That a lot of these institutions cannot survive if they don't have a monopoly. Many people say that a lot of big media in the United States, the legacy media, will not survive if they have to compete on a level playing field with independent journalists. Influencers, new media, even random YouTubers and people on Twitter will have more influence than the major media in the United States, meaning that hold on power is going to collapse. And that hold on power, that institution, is connected to a lot of other things. It's NGOs, it's political parties, it's political narratives, it's the entertainment industries, and that entire establishment that has become the basis of what society is for a very long time is risking basically crumbling if people are no longer censored, if people can say exactly what they think, if the monopoly on the narrative is lost. Because, political action tends to be driven by public demand, and public demand tends to be informed by information. If you control the information, you control public demand, you control the system. It's a very risky thing in the eyes of many of these people if you destabilize that, because you risk destabilizing the governments and systems of the world as we know them. And I think that's also why a lot of them are so concerned about what Trump represents, is because many of them believe that Trump represents a move, as he says, drain the swamp, a move to dismantle that system, which is the way things work right now. That's the way I see it, at least. Let's see, question related to something I mentioned. Ashley from California is saying, is the EU going to get mad even more at Musk now that Meta is following in X's footsteps? Probably. I'm going to be talking more about what Mark Zuckerberg with Meta is coming out and saying today, because I think it's pretty important. I'll give you a preview of it. Tomorrow, again, I'll show you some of the clips. Mark Zuckerberg is coming out. He published a video, and here's what he's done. He's saying that Facebook and Instagram, Meta overall, will no longer be basically censoring people. They're going to still have processes where if somebody's saying threatening things or whatever else like that, you can challenge it, but they're not going to be doing it proactively anymore. He's also going to work with Donald Trump, he says, to go after some of these European countries that are pushing these platforms to censor even in the US. Because, the big problem you're having right now is a lot of the censorship in America is coming from other countries. Because, again, we're dealing with globalist tech companies. These globalist tech companies, they have to deal with the laws of every country on the face of the planet if they want to work in those countries. And so if they violate the UK's laws, the UK can enforce policies on America, right? I'll be talking more about this tomorrow because there's a lot to go into with this, and frankly, it's really interesting. So tune in tomorrow for that episode, and I will show you all the different things they're talking about. We'll have a really interesting discussion on it, I think. Let's see. Enthos38, you're saying power of public awareness might seem more powerful than decision makers because of the influence the public has on them. Yeah, well, case in point. Look at what Elon Musk is doing right now with the UK, for example. In the United Kingdom, with the whole rape gang issue. And look, nobody could even talk about this before. You could not talk about this until now. You see now, most of the media in the United Kingdom are talking about it. If anybody a month ago had mentioned the rape gangs that were raping young women and young girls in the United Kingdom by the thousands, who were trafficking them, in many cases even murdering them, injecting them with lethal amounts of drugs, lighting them on fire, killing them, killing their families, and then covering it up. And the fact that the government in the UK, police agencies, even a lot of civil organizations were also, it seems, helping cover it up. And in addition to that, arresting anybody who talked about it. If you discussed this a month ago, you would have been canceled. You would have been targeted, you would have been harassed, you might even be threatened with extradition to the UK because they were saying that online. There are people in prison in the UK whose only crime was talking about this. There are people who have faced longer prison sentences than the gangs themselves, who are, again, grooming and raping underage girls. People who criticized it are getting longer prison sentences and bigger fines than the rapists. If you had talked about this, you would have been punished until now. And so the fact that this can even be a topic shows the power of public discourse. And on the point of the issue of public awareness, so I've actually seen some of the posts coming out of the UK. A lot of people are saying right now that it wasn't necessarily they believed in covering it up. It's that they actually didn't know what was really going on because nobody could talk about it. How do you know what is being covered up if you don't even know what's happening, right? That's the allegation coming out. Now, again, from the other side of the argument, they would note that they did have an inquiry in 2022, and in that inquiry they looked at the cases between 2010 and 2014, and they had 20 recommendations. The other side of that is that none of those 20 recommendations were ever implemented. And so that's kind of where things are at in the UK. Now, the issue you have with free societies as opposed to communist societies, societies under kings, or societies under fascist or Nazi rule, right? The issue you have with a democratic republic or constitutional republic is that the people are the ones who decide which direction the country goes in. What the people demand is what the government has to do. That is the very nature of a free society. The problem you've had with Europe is that basically a lot of European countries, they went directly from having kings to being under communist or socialist rule. And even though many of them have moved to quote-unquote democratic societies, many of them have maintained a really centralized structure. They never really moved fully in the same direction that maybe the United States did. Whereas in America, independence, again emblazoned in the very, the Bill of Rights and within our Constitution, the Constitution in America has created a different type of society and free society than you have in other democracies, as they call themselves. Because a lot of them maintained the old systems. In many countries in Europe, it's very hard to start a business. In many countries in Europe, it's very hard for you to rise up between classes. In many countries in Europe, the ability to have upward mobility is not really there. In many countries there, wealth is still demonized because they're very, very socialist. If you have more money, you're basically deemed a bad guy. You know what I mean? In many of those countries, they've maintained a type of legal structure that law can be, it's not really written law, it's just kind of interpreted however people want. And the idea of centralization is very, very strong in many of those countries. And so for America dealing with that, we have a lot more freedom, and a lot of them would criticize us and be like, yeah, you have freedom, but you guys are chaotic and crazy and you shoot each other all the time, and that's how they view us, right? Now, back to the point of where I'm going with this. When you have a truly free society, the people and what the people demand determines the policies that are implemented by the government. And so if the people demand that something changes, it may change the laws of the country. If people demand that a major policy is changed, even if that policy has become part of the lifeblood of the system, they have to change it. And so the way that many countries have avoided doing that is through centralized information. Censorship policies, as you see through most of Europe, the ability to suppress public discussion, because they don't have the First Amendment of the Constitution. They don't have freedom of speech like we have it. And so if you can stop discussions from happening in the first place, if you can imprison people for having conversations that go against the demanded policies, then you can crush any potential movement before it can even begin. And if you can then also target influencers and rising political parties and other key figures, label them, destroy their reputations and otherwise, to prevent those movements from growing, then you can maintain a centralized hold on power. And so I would actually say for a long time, this has been what the censorship policies and the suppression of public awareness has achieved in a lot of these countries. And as an extension of that, they've tried exporting that to the United States as well. I think because they view Trump as being a threat against that. Many of these countries view the Trump phenomenon as not being an American phenomenon. They view it as being a global phenomenon. Because when Trump rose, it created online discussion, and the online discussions in the United States spread to other countries. When Trump comes out and criticizes certain powers in the United States, that created criticism of those same types of powers in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, and all over the world. And all those governments that were working together and had a type of, kind of agreed upon cohesion, and, the way of the world was just as it was, suddenly there was a disruption to what had become the normal way of life. And people then began to question media. People then began to question institutions. People then began to question corruption, and there started to be all kinds of discussions around draining the swamp, as Trump was saying, globally. And, for a lot of them, that meant the destruction of basically government as we know it. And that's why they regard Trump as being so extreme. Not because he's pushing for centralized control, but because he's pushing for the destruction of the systems that were the norm for most of the world. And so in Europe and so on, the public awareness sphere has become a threat to the powers that be because they don't want to have the Trump effect taking place in their own backyards. And recently what we've seen with the disillusionment of the government in France, as I don't know if I think we talked about this a little bit. They're facing government collapse in some of these countries. Germany is facing a massive government shakeup. France is facing a massive government shakeup. The UK is facing a massive government shakeup. Canada, massive government shakeup. And if you understand what that means for the European Union, if Germany and France in particular are destabilized and maybe even facing economic trouble, that's the entire European Union. That's the entire EU. Because a lot of other countries in the EU don't pull their own weight. They're kind of bankrolled by Germany and France to a large extent. So, public opinion is the linchpin. Public opinion is the key piece in all of this. And that's why public opinion is being deemed such a sensitive issue by a lot of these individuals, as I see it. And, and the other argument with that is, well, do you really want to destroy it? Right? Do you really want to tear this all down? That's kind of the argument right now, right? JNS 2 1970. You're saying socialism does not work. A good example is the UK. Yeah, and this is what's complicated too. A lot of people misunderstand socialism and communism. When people say that Vladimir Lenin discussed socialism as being kind of entry-level communism, or that the goal of socialism is communism. That's actually not a direct quote, but Vladimir Lenin did write about that. And I'll tell you the exact writing actually. So Vladimir Lenin, again, the first communist dictator in Soviet Russia, right? They had the Bolsheviks, they were a terrorist organization. The Bolsheviks launched their communist revolution, took over Russia. And Vladimir Lenin at the time came out and wrote a public piece because, okay, a bit of history to this. The Russian Bolshevik Revolution disrupted the global communist movement for this reason. The theory of communism is a type of social evolution. And so it was believed by communists at the time, early 1900s, that communism would emerge from advanced, late-stage capitalist countries, meaning they believed it would be the United Kingdom or Germany, countries that were very far on industrialization, that you'd have a worker movement and the workers of the world would unite and they would seize control of the institutions and take over the businesses and get rid of their bosses and everything else, and the workers would own everything, right? That was the communist promise. That did not happen. What happened instead was the advanced economies, right? The countries that were late-stage capitalism, as you would call it, did not do that. They actually became more successful. And it turned out that capitalism created a better way of life. The United States became the model for that. And then what they also found was that industrialization did not lead more to enslavement. Instead, it led to efficiency, which then made life easier. And in addition to that, then the Bolshevik Revolution hit. And the Bolshevik Revolution was not in a late-stage capitalist society, it was not in an industrialist society, and it was not carried out by the workers. The Bolshevik Revolution was carried out by the military and the intelligentsia. Their targets were the poor farmers, or the kulaks, the farmers who were doing well, right? So it was not a workers' revolution. It was actually a military coup in many regards, and again, of the intellectuals in many regards. It was also not in an advanced capitalist society. Russia at the time was an agrarian society. They were a farming culture, barely out of they were still in they were still under Tsarist Russia. They were still like a feudal society, basically, right? And so that disrupted the communist movement. They're like, well, that's not what Karl Marx said. That's not how it's supposed to work. And also, it wasn't a natural revolution. It was a very violent revolution, right? And then Vladimir Lenin came out to try to defend, yes, saying that they're communist. And his writing was this, because a lot of people said, well, once communism is achieved, we'll live in the communist utopia and everybody's going to be happy. And then when Vladimir Lenin took over, he didn't do that, right? He didn't destroy the government. He didn't relinquish power. He didn't give the power to the people. He centralized power. He kept everything to himself, as every communist government has ever done. And then he came out and he wrote a paper. And the paper was along the lines of the translation would be something like, how can we achieve the stage of communism if we fear the stage of socialism, right? Vladimir Lenin wrote this paper. And what he argued is that to achieve the communist utopia, you first have to go through a stage of state capitalist monopoly, meaning the government has seized the reins of capitalism. All the businesses have been taken over by the government. Everything in the society has been taken over by the government. And that was what he referred to as the state capitalist monopoly, or socialism. And so socialism is that. Socialism is the state capitalist monopoly. And this is also why a lot of communists say, well, communism has never been tried. Well, what is that, right? It's because when communism is enacted in government, the form it takes is socialism. That's what it is. Communism exists through what they call the negation of the negation. You have to achieve the destruction of everything. All religions, all institutions, all culture, all beliefs, everything. The family structure, human civilization. You have to destroy every single thing to achieve communism. Because it's kind of the hard reset of humanity, where they believe that man will achieve its destiny of recreating man in the image of man, not influenced by tradition or what has been. Notably, one of the big concerns when people talk about becoming what can be, not what has been, or whatever the slogan was, right? That's what communism is. And of course, history has shown what that looks like. Well, communism takes power in government, and then they try to destroy everything. They kill the religious believers, they massacre people, they destroy wealth, they take over the businesses, and they enact policies to wipe out tradition, wipe out culture, wipe out the memory of what we were, rewrite history, destroy literature, burn books, everything else. That's what communism does. And we've witnessed the utopia. Technically, modern-day Russia would be the post-communist society. And so unless you believe that Russians are the most highly evolved people on earth, then you would acknowledge communism doesn't work, frankly, because that's what it looks like once it's achieved. It's also why the Chinese Communist Party carried out the move to destroy the four olds during the Cultural Revolution. Old beliefs, old traditions, old religions, and so on, right? They want to destroy the past. So on that point now, many countries have adopted some form of communism. I would not say the United Kingdom is full socialist, but they have many socialist policies, and many people there believe in socialism. In the United States, we have some parts of communism, but it's more so within the cultural system. We have a lot of communist influence in the culture of our country, whereas in Europe, it's a lot in the institutions and so on. Some countries are outright communist, right? Like communist China, Cuba, North Korea, parts of Vietnam and a few other countries. And so, even if a country doesn't call itself total communist, unfortunately, many countries have adopted parts of communism. And the real irony is that it tends to be the parts of communism that cause those societies to not work. It tends to be those elements that break societies. As ironic as that is, hey, you implement an ideology that actually calls for the destruction of civilization, and it starts destroying what you implemented it into. Why are you surprised? That's the whole idea. The whole concept is about destroying civilization. Why are you surprised if you put it in a place and it destroys what you place it in? That is what it's for. And so I don't know why people are surprised by this stuff. It's shocking how little people seem to understand what they're even doing when it comes to these things. But yes, I would argue a lot of the problems that you see in the UK are rooted in communist ideology, as many of the problems in the US that we see are rooted in communist ideology. And others have pointed out this problem as well, the idea of state interventionism. State interventionist policy ironically tends to be the thing that people criticize as being capitalism, when in reality it's caused by communism. The very concept, what they call a mixed model society, is rooted in state interventionism. And we have a lot of false debates because of this. There are a lot of false debates because of the lack of understanding of these dynamics, unfortunately. Jeremy Barker, you're saying, why one bill? You're talking about Donald Trump trying to enact his policy with one bill, and some others like Lindsey Graham, I believe, want two bills, right? You're saying, why one bill? Make them all separate bills. That way we can see how the money is being wasted on congresspersons' pet projects. U.S. $36 trillion in debt. Yeah, a few things with this. So Donald Trump wants to get rid of the debt ceiling. And the reason for that is, although we are $36 trillion in debt and very rapidly counting, the entire world right now, to an extent, is facing economic collapse. And the concern that this is my personal impression, but the concern I believe that Trump has is that he's basically being handed right now a system on the brink of collapse, not just in the United States, but in every corner of the planet. We are facing a global economic meltdown. And unfortunately, part of the global economy is being propped up by America basically subsidizing different countries. Propped up by our trade deficits. Look at Canada, for example, where they're saying that if we put tariffs on them, or if we even balance out our trade deficit, we will destroy their country. They cannot survive if they lose that $100 billion deficit. Their government will be fundamentally changed. Mexico is facing that as well, $200 billion deficit with the United States we trade with them at. We trade at massive loss to many countries. And the argument is, yeah, America should change this, but if you try to change it too rapidly, you will actually have the effect of destabilizing the world. And so Donald Trump is asking for the debt ceiling to be eliminated entirely, meaning he will not come into a government where he no longer has the ability to spend money. Because were he to come in right now, the debt ceiling has already been hit. He would not be able to spend additional money unless the debt ceiling is raised, meaning his only option would be to cut funding below the debt level and then spend what little pennies he has left over from that. That's his argument. And, I would say it's complicated because I don't believe in spending money you don't have. I think it's a losing proposition always. One of the biggest lessons my dad taught me on how to manage my money, he told me, never spend money you don't have. I know sometimes that's not possible though. If you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a nice car, if you want to basically live a normal life, you sometimes have to go into some debt. And so that is at times unavoidable, but you should also work in getting yourself out of debt. The challenge Trump is going to have is that if he doesn't spend money, if he doesn't have a budget, if they are not able to do this, he basically will be hamstrung for his entire administration. And those 4 years is going to go by like nothing. Because after a year and a half, look, Trump's going to come into office, supermajority, he can kind of do whatever he wants if Republicans are with him. Year and a half, you're going to have the midterm elections. The Democrats will probably win some seats back. Trump will probably lose his supermajority. Politics tends to do that. It is a swinging pendulum, and when it swings one way, it almost always swings the other way. And that is just the reality of life. In a year and a half, 2 years, Trump will very likely lose the supermajority. And so he has a year and a half to implement his policies. He has a year and a half to push very hard and do the things he wants to do before he loses that, because he probably will. And I think he's preparing for that. And the problem you have with some of these policies is that they're not going to be easy to rapidly implement. And he knows also he will face challenges from the legal system. He will implement something, and a random judge in some part of America will block his policy, and it will have to wait to go to the Supreme Court. And unless they can fast track it, it's going to delay it by months or a year or longer. And that window of a year and a half, 2 years before the midterms is going to be encroaching ever faster. And so I think he's racing against the clock, which is why he wants this done immediately on his desk by the end of April, which is the plan he's suggesting. And there are a lot of people who will try to prevent that from happening, I believe, as well, because many of them want to delay. Delaying will be the opposition. The opposition strategy, I personally believe, will be to stall things as long as possible, because they only need about 2 years. And if they can delay it to that, 2 years, midterms, 1 year after that, campaign trail for the next election. And the year leading up to that will be the big political debate on who's going to be the next president. And it's probably not going to be Trump, because he's on his second term unless he overturns term limits. And so that's kind of where we're going to be. And so just me guessing on why he's trying to do the one bill, this is why I believe he's doing that. Just me trying to analyze what his reasoning might be with that. All right, folks, that said, join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I want to go into what's happening with Meta and Zuckerberg really seeming wanting to work with Donald Trump, and Zuckerberg may be kind of aligning ironically with Elon Musk in terms of what they could represent for free speech. What a time to be alive. We will discuss this tomorrow as well as other stories, so join me then. Folks, I'm sorry about the technical problems today. I know we had some issues, but tune in again tomorrow and we should have them all worked out by, hopefully pretty soon. Shouldn't be issues tomorrow. I will see you then, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please like this video, share it, help us get the word out. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.